welcome to Policing TV, where I'm delighted to have with me today Louise Harrison, who is the Chief Fire Officer, Chief Executive at Buckinghamshire Fire and Rescue Service. So welcome, Louise.
Thank you.
Just by introduction, Louise started her career in policing in 1992 with Merseyside Police, up to the rank of BCU Commander before moving over to the Civil Nuclear Constabulary in 2020, where you had quite a big portfolio with ACC operations, big part of CNC, before leaving in 2023, end of last year, but then quite soon transitioned across to the fire service, which is an unusual track. I think we were discussing just before we started recording about whether you're the first to transition at that senior level to senior level, but we'll work that out at some point in the future. So an interesting story. And also in that period held the portfolio for the Regional Prevent Lead. So a really busy few portfolios. You don't look too stressed on it, so that's a really good thing. So we're going to do two interviews with Louise. This first one is to concentrate on her policing career, which is extensive in Merseyside and then Civil Nuclear. And in the second one, we're going to explore that interesting transition over to the Fire and Rescue Service in Buckinghamshire. So again, thanks, Louise, for making the time. I appreciate it's always busy for you in the job. So over to you, really. And if I could just open with that first question that people often have an interest in is, what happened in 1992 or thereabouts that led you to join the police service?
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. So firstly, some of your listeners might recognise I've got a really mushed up accent, which is from having been brought up down south and then moving up to Merseyside when I was 18 and having spent, a vast chunk of my life up there. So, but I'm back down south, which is full circle. But anyway, so I'd moved up to Merseyside when I was 18, had done a few jobs, realised I really enjoyed working in sort of public service, whether that was retail or I actually worked in a building society for a while, but wasn't really sure what I wanted to do. But the irony is the rationale for joining, one of the reasons I joined was that I didn't want to be stuck behind a desk all day, which, as you can see now, I'm stuck behind a desk all day. And I ended up working for Bradford and Bingley Building Society when I was in Merseyside, and became really, really good friends with a lovely lady there called Debbie, who just happened to be married to a detective called Andy Cook. And I remember always saying to her, I've always fancied doing the police. It looks really interesting. No day's the same. I bet you learn lots. I bet you get to know lots. So she basically went and got me an application form and said, Andrew says you need to fill this in. So I did. And literally the rest is history. I kind of applied, joined, and have never looked back.
Fantastic. I haven't heard of that route before, sitting in your day job and your friend encouraging you. So your early years then in uniform, I guess, is the normal track. Tell us about that.
Yeah. So I joined in 1992. I was one of only 3 other women on my course. We still had the regional training centres at the time, so I spent my training period up at Bruges doing sort of your 10 weeks and then your 5 weeks. Absolutely loved it. Realised that quite quickly that I think I wanted to stay doing the uniform side of policing, but open to whatever came along. And I think I got some really, really good advice, probably on my second day in service, by this gnarly old detective who basically just said to me, look, just take whatever is offered to you, because you might be offered courses that you've never really thought about doing, but you'll always learn something, you'll always meet new people, and you never know when that networking will come in handy. And it was really, really wise words, actually. And I sort of took that with me. So I got posted to the city centre, wow, what a baptism of fire, you know, a young probationer. We used to have consecutive collar numbers as well. So all the scallywags knew exactly how much service you had. And they used to have some fun with me. I had a southern accent, so I was just wet behind the ears. And, you know, I spent the first 2 years in Merseyside actually trying to understand what people were saying to me, because they speak so fast up there. But being on foot as a probationer in the city centre, the nighttime economy, the tourism, you know, the partnership working, it was just absolutely fantastic. I had a ball. And, you know, back in those days, you as a probationer, you never got in a car. So you were literally had your beats. There was probably about, I don't know, 6 or 7 of us probationers at the same time, all working different beats, getting pegged by your sergeant, doing your licensing visits. We had a lot of sex workers on the area, the patch that I used to work as well. So all the kind of challenges of managing, you know, they were all ladies at the time, managing them and their clients, shoplifting, you name it. I think you learn. I was so lucky that in 2 years of my probation, I just learned so much, because you literally saw everything, did everything, dealt with everything. It was amazing. And I think that was probably the thing that made me have the confidence to move on and not stay too long in one place. My tutor constable at the time was a lovely, lovely guy, and only sort of relatively young, but he'd been there on that same section for 20 something years. And I just thought, you know, there's so much out there. There's so many opportunities to go and diversify, learn, do different things, experience different teams, that I knew that that's what I didn't want to do, was stay still for too long. So I think, you know, throughout my service, I've had quite a wide and varied different amounts of roles, albeit all most of them in uniform, because I've not wanted to stay still. I've wanted to go and learn and develop.
Well, that's always the beauty of policing, isn't there? There's many careers within a career. I've got one observation, a couple of questions. I think this sounds like an old stooger saying this. It is, in fact, it's me. So, but I think that traditional probationary period of lots of walking, lots of town centres, particularly in somewhere like Merseyside, is a fantastic grounding. For a police career, because just listening to you then, I'm not sure there was anything on your list that you almost missed dealing with. But the question I had really, so in 1992, 1993, 94, but I had 2 questions really. What was the issues around female officers then? Not so much issues, but the attitude towards and that period of change. And the second one is, what were your aspirations at kind of that 2-year mark? Because you've gone on to some very senior roles, and I'm just inquisitive as to when that notion, when that thought happened that actually I'd like to move on.
Yeah, really good questions. So it felt like I was in a minority. You know, we did have, because it was the city centre, it was big, we had big sections. And so there were a number of females, a couple on my section, but definitely on the other sections as well. So there was a solidarity with us. I mean, you have to remember at the time, you know, I got issued with a handbag, I got issued with a truncheon that big. You know, I wasn't quite put on school crossing duty, but there was still very much that if it involved kids or sex workers, it was a female thing to deal with. And I remember we got issued with skirts, and I think we were kind of coming to that stage where it was like, how do you expect me to run after someone or climb over a wall? So they issued us culottes, the most hideous things I think I've ever seen in a police uniform ever. I don't know whether you ever saw them, Trevor. Hopefully you didn't have to wear them. But yeah, it was. But there was real solidarity, and I never experienced any kind of sexism at that level. Not that I recognised anyway. You did feel like you were slightly different, and I guess with the benefit of hindsight nowadays, you could say there was definitely less opportunities for women. but equally, I was never made to feel that. I was made to feel very, very safe on the sections I worked. Absolutely respected in terms of the work that I did. But I think I switched on pretty quickly that you do have to work hard. You know, I kind of arrived at the conclusion that I really needed to demonstrate I was good enough and work hard. You know, I had a and I did work hard. I had a really, really good arrest rate, which at the time was a thing. But I really wanted to just be the best police officer that I could be. And that, for me, was about making sure I experienced as much as I could, that I had different experiences of dealing with different offences, all that kind of stuff. I wanted to be a rounded person and to be accepted as a good police officer, if that makes sense. I think from 2 years, so working in the city centre, saw a lot of violence. There was quite a bit of gun crime, obviously, in Merseyside at that time. And this is going to sound a bit arrogant, but I just remember seeing officers dealing with things in quite poorly at times. And I just remember thinking, I think I could do that. And I think I could do that better. And we, in the city centre at the time, we had a number of armed response vehicles. Again, we were in a transition phase from the ARVs coming across from traffic into their own sort of department. It was still fairly new, but I remember thinking at the end of 2 years, I want to carry a gun. That was it. No aspirations for promotion. Nothing other than I want to do and learn as much as I can in the time that I've got to be a cop.
And I assume, because I think I know you well enough to say that when you set your mind on something, so I assume then did you then transition into what we now recognise as ARVs or whatever format?
Yeah. And it was difficult, and I think that's probably the first time that I experienced some pushback. You know, it was still a very, very male-dominated environment. Again, there was a number of women alongside me who had applied for the ARVs, firearms instructors, and I can say this, at the time, are not the fire instructors we have today. Our firearms instructors in policing are absolutely amazing. It was a different environment to operate in, I think it's fair to say then. So it was really, really difficult. You know, we were using revolvers. There was no kind of special adaptation if you had small hands like I've got in terms of, you know, holding a firearm. It was just difficult, and it probably wasn't set up for having a huge range of difference in that department. But yeah, I did. I passed my firearms course. I think I was the second female that went into Merseyside ARVs, and loved it. Loved the excitement of it, the thrill of it. And it was just that accomplishment as well of having done something which I knew was really, really difficult to do. So yeah.
That was, around that time, was pretty groundbreaking. And I remember just from my own force then that we did have female officers coming through, some very good ones, but it felt groundbreaking at the time. In the mid-90s, it was that, I think, that first period where I think the interest was started, and obviously people like you know, the first female officers that joined become those role models, aren't they? Become that, actually, this is achievable. So promotion wise then, so you've obviously spent some time on the ARVs. When did promotion and progression kind of enter your thinking?
So again, I did the ARVs for a while. I was actually seconded into the ARVs because I was working in the operational support division at the time, which was in the same department, but it was kind of the teams that went out and did the warrants, all the public order, you know, level 1 and level 2, all the rapid entries, all the really, really exciting stuff, really, I guess. And so after I'd done my stint in the ARVs, I went back, and then I think it was just seeing other people and other supervisors. I had fantastic supervisors, but I also saw supervisors that really weren't very good. And I just remember thinking, is that something I could do? Is it something I could try and do? So I remember sitting my sergeant's exam. I passed that. I sat my first board, absolutely bombed it. I just wasn't prepared for it. I didn't really understand the questions. But then went back and had another go. And in between that, I'd had a period of time off because I'd had a baby. But again, changing times, I found out I'd passed my board when I was about 6 months pregnant. I was on light duties. And I think at the time you got 3 months maternity leave. So I literally left a new baby at home and started my role as a sergeant on response, again in a really, really busy area in Walton Lane, which has got all the both football stadiums, areas of quite high deprivation, real challenge, just outside the city centre, really, really, really busy response area. But again, just loved it. But it was harder, once you've got a baby, it does make you think slightly differently. Some of the stuff that was really exciting to do, you kind of think twice about doing again. Like driving, car chases were great fun, weren't they? But I think once you've got a baby at home, you think, do I really, you think about risk a bit more, I guess, when you've got a family.
Yes. And that's quite a big ask, taking, a huge family change for you.
Yeah.
And just the logistics of that, let alone obviously having those thoughts around risk, but even just logistics, and then taking on the response role in Merseyside kind of city centre. That's quite a big change.
Yeah, it was a big change. But it goes back to that thing about wanting to challenge yourself, and I can see now with hindsight, I probably pushed myself so hard at times. And you do make those sacrifices, don't you? I mean, every police officer will know, and support staff as well, that working in an occupation like this isn't easy, and you do have to make those sacrifices. But I probably wasn't very kind on myself at times in terms of just pushing myself, because I went from working on response to seeing an advert that was, it was advertised for sergeants in the mounted section. And I remember thinking, I'll have a go at that. Never ridden a horse in my life. The inspector of the mounted probably wishes I'd never tried, but there you go. You're on a 16-week course trying to learn how to ride a big, hairy, massive horse around the city centre. But again, it was just about experiencing it, doing policing in a different way, learning a different skill. And I think those are the attractions that I've retained throughout the whole of my service. I just love learning and doing something different, and I love that challenge.
And did you pass the 16-week course on the big hairy thing?
Yeah. It was a complete swerve in terms of, it just goes to show how little career pathway or aspiration I had. I went from doing response to sitting on a horse. I ended up in A&E a few times. I think at one stage I thought, I am actually going to kill myself. This is really irresponsible of me. But you know what? I did it, and it was one of the proudest things, because I was a novice. And it was a hard course, and there were people there that really could ride horses really well. But I've got such wonderful memory. There's nothing better than walking in the morning and just walking into a stable full of warm hay and having a horse there. They're just beautiful if you like horses. And I managed to do some of the ceremonial stuff while I was in the mounted. I got to lead the winner in at Aintree Grand National. Just some amazing memories and highlights for me. It made the pain worthwhile. Definitely.
I didn't know that about you, as it happens, and I was quite surprised just then when you said it. But you've certainly pushed yourself into some. I have so much respect for armed officers here in the UK and abroad. I just do. So that in itself is an enormous challenge for anyone. And then not content with mastering that and being successful, you then go, oh, I do the mountain. I mean, I don't want to ask the next question is, what did you do after that? Because I don't know what it'll be. You clearly kept challenging yourself.
Yeah.
And just actually, you just said, can I just ask, what was that moment like? Aintree is a massive event, it's a worldwide event, isn't it? So
Yeah.
what was that? That must be a pinnacle in there in terms of a memory of being on the mountain section.
Yeah, it was. It was amazing and terrifying because, as I kept being told by some of the trainers, I didn't have a good seat, which is a technical term for being a crap horse rider. And whilst it was a massive honour, I think I was more worried about just please don't fall off in front of millions of TV cameras. The horse I was on was quite skitterish and flighty, and I just remember thinking this could go horribly wrong, and that's what you worry about, don't you? But the really nice thing was, and it was a lovely round circle moment for me, so one of the last jobs I did before I left Merseyside was I was the commander at Aintree. So nice. I had ground command for Aintree, and it was just a lovely moment being able to reflect where I was as a sergeant and where I'd ended up, sort of at superintendent ranks, managing, probably the most famous horse meeting in the
Yes.
calendar year. It was lovely, actually. So yeah, it was great. And then I left. So I sat my inspector's exam while I was at the Mounted, failed that, did it again, got promoted. It was when we started changing the structures of promotion. So rather than have to do a board, you had to start doing a development portfolio. So I knew I wasn't ever going to stay in the Mounted it wasn't going to be a career move because I wasn't very good at it. So I just made the decision now, look, if I'm being offered an opportunity to take the next rank and do a development portfolio, that's what I'm going to do. So again, sort of frying pan fire, I ended up going into neighbourhood policing, which I loved, but ended up with some really tough neighbourhoods. So I ended up with Croxteth and Norris Green and all the factional, gang warfare that was pretty much going on there for a long time, and that ended up resulting in, the really, really awful death of Reese. So, but again, you learn so much, don't you? As a neighbourhood inspector, you've actually got the autonomy to manage and really make a difference to the communities that you're working in, and it was one of my favourite jobs, I think.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds enormously. I don't know Merseyside well, but that sounds like an enormously challenging job. I mean, the fact I recognise those neighbourhoods will tell me that it was a challenging job because obviously, media-wise. So, and what was the path for you after that? Because obviously, you've now built this very significant portfolio of operational policing. So, what was your path then from chief inspector up into the BCU?
Yeah, I was really lucky. I had a great, and he was an unofficial mentor. He was actually one of the superintendents there, and he's still serving now in a different service, a different force. But he was brilliant, and I'd known him from my days within the operational support division. We'd passed our sergeant's exams together, actually, but he'd just gone off and done great things and really kind of focused on his career pathway, whereas I just sort of tinkered around the edges with horses and stuff. And I remember him saying to me one day, when are you going to stop messing about and actually have a plan? And I just remember thinking, yeah, maybe I should start thinking about having a plan, because I was just, what's new? What can I do next? And he gave me I've still got it actually. He gave me an action plan, which basically said, look, don't drop in the crap. Have a plan. Think about doing this, and have a 5-year loose idea of what you want to do. And so I did various roles as an inspector. I left neighbourhood. I went back to the support group and did a bit of time there. I had the opportunity to work as a staff officer filling in. But again, what a great experience to work in that environment. And I had Bernard Hogan Howe as our chief then, Pat Gallen was one of our ACCs, Helen King, Simon Byrne. So some really strong personalities. And so learning to navigate that political with a small p pathway at that level was fascinating. And then I got promoted again. I became the chief inspector, and I got, again, a lovely full circle moment. I got to be the chief inspector for the city centre in Liverpool. So, again, really, really challenging, really busy, but I loved, working with partners on the nighttime economy to get things like purple flag status. At the time there was money as well floating around, there was various pots you could dip into. So we just did so many really, really good initiatives around feelings of safety, keeping people safe. It was just a fantastic time, and again, a job that I loved.
Gosh, that's a fairly full-on job in the city centre.
Yeah.
But having said that, you seem to have spent your career doing those busy operational jobs.
Yeah.
And so to complete that circle, as you say, the BCU commander, so going up into the superintendent ranks.
Yeah.
Did that culminate in then the aspiration to up into what is NPCC now, but the ACPO as it was then, in terms of the SCC and those types of courses? What was that path then before you then left Merseyside?
Yeah, so I had been asked to go and work on a project, again, full circle, with the fire service, and it was to help build the Joint Command and Control Centre in Merseyside, which was a collaboration project with fire. And I did that for a couple of years. Again, I learned so much. It was great working with the sector. I know we'll come on to that later. But again, I got to experience things like running projects, managing people at a different level, managing the politics of, funding arrangements, and, providing a provision for two services. So again, it was fascinating. And I did that as a temporary superintendent and then passed my board. I went to St Helens, one of our basic command units, out sort of on the east side of Merseyside. Again, really different, really challenging, an old mining town. So areas of real deprivation, a lot of vulnerability, but amazing people. And they speak, they don't have Liverpool accents either. So it's almost like a small little different world. But so a very different culture as well. So I did that. I did sit PNAC twice, which was the gateway, as you know, into, because I was supported by my chief, which was fantastic. Another full circle moment. That chief was then Andy Cook, whose wife I used to work with in the Building Society many years ago. And he supported me in going for it. I didn't pass it. I failed it twice. And then just thought, if that's the route I want to go, I need to do something different, because I've focused on ops for so long. I clearly need to diversify and think differently. So I had the opportunity to work in CTP Northwest. They're based in Manchester, but it was a regional lead for Prevent. And again, I just thought, it's something I've never done. I've got skills which I believe I can transfer over. I've got a love of uniform and working with the public and communities, but it's a different angle. It's a different type of policing. So I went and did that for 2 and a bit years. Absolutely loved it. Fascinating environment to work in. It was really busy at the time as well, because we'd had the MEN arena bombing. So there was a huge work going on in terms of Mantline, which was the investigation for the MEN bombing. And again, it was a real opportunity to take what I'd learned from working in communities and, harnessing really good relationships with partners and bringing it into a sort of regional space. And then really, by chance, I had, it was a consultancy company that rang me and just said, look, there's an ACC role in CNC going. We're looking for somebody who's got experience in uniform, who's got some CT background, and has got a firearms background. And so it's funny, isn't it, how your career just sort of, I've kind of almost falling into a lot of these by accident, but actually what they were looking for was something that I had done throughout the course of my service. And again, you know, that transition for me was fantastic, working from a local service, a local force, into a regional environment, and then CNC, as you know, is a national armed police service. So I just feel incredibly lucky, and it has probably been more by luck than design that I've had the opportunity through my service to do those things, which has led me on to CNC.
Yeah, there is some luck. There always is, right place, right time. But I think you mentioned early on in the discussion how you pushed yourself hard, perhaps too hard at times. But I'm a great believer in, excuse me, that bears fruit in the future because of the investment you've made in yourself at the time. So I think, there is luck. There is. It's just all about luck. Is often the timing. I think is what you invested in yourself and the service.
Yeah, I agree. And sorry, go on.
No, go on.
I was just going to say that's probably one of the key messages. I'm really lucky because I get invited to go and talk occasionally and impart my wisdom with a small W. But that's one of the things I always talk about. Actually, it's about not necessarily pushing yourself, but being able to experience and have a diversity of experience that does pay off down the line. I'm like you. I genuinely believe that when you do put the hard work in, you do bear the fruits of that labour at some point.
Yes. Well, Louise, I think we could do a whole day about your career. It's absolutely fascinating. I thought my research had told me everything about you, but the mountain branch was a little bit left field. So thank you very much for the reflections on your time in your police career. And in the second segment, we're going to talk about your new career in the fire service. So again, thank you for sharing with us this really fascinating and really interesting career. So for now, Louise, thanks very much. And then we'll talk again about your transition over to the fire service.
Thanks.